Good day, liberators and fellow citizens. What I'm going to share with you again is going to be controversial. However, I've done my homework and I expect each and every one of you to also go and confirm what I have said now or what I'm going to tell you. I'm convinced that the South African government is currently responsible for the national state of disaster and that they have intentionally created it. Now, I do sound like a conspiracy theorist, but I'm going to show you proof from their own resources and from the mainstream media they are currently using to spread the one after the other propaganda to totally confuse us all. And you make up your own mind. But this needs to be shared with as many as possible people. Let me first start with taking you back to the 15th of March 2020 when the first national state of disaster was declared. Now, in that government gazette, this was a very historic government gazette, obviously, dated the 15th of March 2020. In the first part, it was classified as a national disaster first. Dr. Tao, he is the head of the National Disaster Management Center, and he classified the COVID-19 pandemic as a national disaster. Now, based on the classification as a national disaster, the Minister of Cooperative Governance and Traditional Affairs, Dr. Dlamini Zuma, then declared a national state of disaster shortly thereafter. And please take note that she said here in this government gazette that Section 27.1 of the Act hereby, that in terms of Section 27.1 of the Act, hereby declare national state of disaster, having recognized that special circumstances exist to warrant the declaration of a national state of disaster. Now, people, this was what we have also challenged as Liberty Fighters Network when we've challenged the national state of disaster and the regulations that followed. We said that you cannot just say that there's special circumstances, but you don't identify what these special circumstances are. And each and every time when we threw that argument at the court said, oh no, we are COVID 19 denialists. So it was never answered. We still don't know, after the termination of the national state of disaster for COVID, we still don't know what these special circumstances are. Now, let me also further refresh you on what happened during January this year, and I'm going to refer to the mainstream media themselves so that we can just remember what happened during January. So, during January, um, here, during South Africa, deadly floods hit Eastern Cape. This was on the 9th of January 2022. This was in the flood list. There's other various other articles about this, and there's the floods in the Eastern Cape. It had a lot of damage, created a lot of damages and death to people and loss of lives. And then also there is South Africa dozens evacuate floods in KZN. This was on the 19th of January 2022, also on the flood list. And there's Lady Smith, I believe. Yes, in Lady Smith, that is how it looked then. Um, so yeah, we remember these things, but we have forgotten them, unfortunately. We have totally forgotten what happened there because those floods and those havoc that was created then already, Dr. Tao came out and he then on the 19th of January in Government Gazette 45789 of the 19th of January classified after assessing the magnitude and severity of the severe weather events occurring in parts of the Republic that resulted in the loss of life and damage to property, infrastructure, and the environment caused by flooding, strong winds, sinkholes, landslides, etc. I classified these occurrences as a national disaster. So he already classified it on the 19th of January 2022 as a national disaster, way back on the 19th of January. Now, what did government do? They sat back, relaxed, took a joint maybe that they rolled for themselves, and they just relaxed, yes. And then suddenly, when the new flood started, they then, let me show you this. On the 13th of April 2022, in Government Gazette 46241, Dr. Tao classified those floods. Now, this is almost a verbatim repeat of the national disaster classification of the 19th of January. But in here, he restricted it to KZN province. So it was classified as a provincial disaster. It's a provincial disaster. So now the question is, did he downgrade the national disaster classification to a provincial disaster? Because he never reissued or reclassified that provincial disaster as a national disaster. So we can reasonably understand that the national disaster of the 19th of January classification is still there, and he then downgraded it to a provincial disaster. Now, I want to know from the government how it was possible for Minister Dlamini Zuma on the 18th of April to declaration of a national state of disaster, impact of severe weather events. This is basically the same heading as the one on the 19th of January, which was then classified as a national disaster. But here she said that suddenly, based on what Dr. Tao said here in the provincial disaster classification, he said that it was restricted to KZN province, and here in the declaration of a national state of disaster, now it's suddenly KwaZulu Natal and Eastern Cape. So the provincial disaster that was declared by Dr. Tao, or classified as a national disaster, has now suddenly become a provincial disaster only. But yet, she has took it upon herself to say that, and following the reclassification of these occurrences as a national disaster. A reclassification. um, People, there was never a reclassification as such. So, technically speaking, the Minister of Gogda took a provincial classification of a provincial disaster and made a national and declared a national state of disaster. Let me show you this as well. Now she said that it's a reclassified, and then she said that in terms of section 27. 27.1 of the Act hereby declare national state of disaster, having recognized that special circumstances exist to warrant the declaration of a national state of disaster. It's basically a deja vu that is now happening. Because way back on the 15th of March, as I've showed you, they also said that the reason they need to declare a national state of disaster was as a result of special circumstances. So we couldn't get those special circumstances way back when we challenged the national state of disaster for COVID-19, and now they have just repeated it to say that there's special circumstances, because the Act itself, let me show you this, says that in section 27, a declaration of national state of disaster, in the event of a national disaster, so there must be a national disaster. The minister may, by notice in the Gazette, declare national state of disaster if A. Existing legislation and contingency arrangements do not adequately provide for the national executive to deal effectively with a disaster, or other special circumstances warrant the declaration of a national state of disaster. Now, we have seen that what I've showed you in previous videos, that when it came to the declaration of the national state of disaster for COVID-19, and there were other legislation which they could have utilized to fight the disaster. But the courts, as I've showed you in the previous video, said no, sorry, those regulations or those legislation we don't think was fit or were fit, and so they could have utilized it. But the answer, or the question, what these special circumstances are, have never been answered, and now we are sitting in exactly the same position. But now I want to show you something that is really frightening. And when I'm going to say this is that I have experienced this myself. I've seen this myself, so I can testify from my own evidence that this is happening. Cloud seeding. People, cloud seeding is widespread not only in South Africa but also in the entire world. Now, let me show you what cloud seeding is for those of you who don't understand this concept, and let me show you um, this. And firstly, when when someone puts a Wikipedia um, article of the 2022 Kwazulu Natal floods in April 2022, days of heavy rain across KwaZulu Natal, blah 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 blah. When someone takes the time to write an extensive article on Wikipedia, you must know that something is behind this. No one will take an event that is not very important and write an extensive article about this with even proper references attached to it. So this was done professionally. And then let's just see here what our own Business Insider South Africa. This was dated the 19th of April. South Africa must spend more on climate adaptation, says Ramaphosa, as KZN floods become national disaster. And this article is about South Africa needs to spend more money on climate adaptation in the face of climate change, President Cyril Ramaphosa said on Monday night. Um, People, I don't call it climate change. I call it climate terrorism. Because what I'm going to show you now is terrorism by the government itself. Now, let me show you this part. Cloud seeding. Oh, yeah. Now I must show you Yahoo Finance. This is an international publication. Now it says cloud seeding market size 2022 to 2029, cloud seeding industry share revenue and future outlook by Fortune Business Insights. Cloud seeding is a business. It's an illegal business and it's happening in our own country, and even our own government is utilizing it, and I'm going to show you this. Now, let's go on. They explain here how much money there is to make, but for you who don't know, cloud seeding is a weather control technique in which chemical agents are dropped into clouds to induce rain. The main chemical agents seeded in the upper part of clouds include silver iodide, dry ice, and even common table salt. For example, in Russia and South Africa, this is an international publication, people. So internationally, South Africa is recognized as probably the most important research country in the world for cloud seeding. Go and research this for yourself because I've determined that already. So go and check that out. Now, further, they say that in well, it's basically to control the rain. And way back, look at here, people. This is an article on the 4th of December 2019. In this very article, the government said that they're going to use cloud seeding to fight the extensive droughts, especially in the Northern Cape. Now, let's read. Government will use fog harvesting and cloud seeding to fight South Africa's water crisis. Here it says that Minister of Water and Sanitation, Lindiwe Sisulu, at that time has outlined the department's plans to fight the major drought crisis facing South Africa. And to fight this ongoing crisis, Sisulu said that South Africa will, there you have it, cloud seeding. Cloud seeding, people. The government said that they're going to use cloud seeding for the drought. And earlier this year, in February, me and my family went to the Cape. We drove there and we drove through the Karoo, and we've said that we saw this massive plague of locusts. It turned out that the locust plague, it's such a big plague that the farmers cannot deal with it. It has affected 33 regions and towns in the Northern Cape area, and it has even spread to other parts of the Western Cape and parts of the Free State. And now look at what this is. Oh, and this is also another article about the cloud seeding. Nearly 150 countries have experimented with cloud seeding techniques on a regular basis. These include Australia, Austria, Canada, China, the world's heaviest user, England, France, India, Jordan, and blah, blah, blah. Now, here is an article on the 11th of March in News 24, ever expanding locust outbreak in Northern Cape affecting 33 farming towns. People, when we drove through the Karoo, and it was like a gravel road full of dead locusts. It looked like a gravel road. It was brown. We even took videos of it. And when you drove on the road over those locusts, it was slippery and sliding, or the car was slippery and sliding. It was dangerous to move over those dead locusts. And they were just everywhere. And even when we returned, we also saw it, and then they started to fly. So those small ones that were going over the road and killed by the cars, later on they became flying locusts. And now this is what recently, and it's here. Daily Maverick, plague of locusts marks South Africa's biggest outbreak cycle in 25 years. Now let's see here what the reason for this is. Once widespread drought-breaking rains fall, then all the locusts hatch out in many areas. The locusts can then breed successfully in the wetter conditions, and after a few generations, a plague can develop. This was in the Daily Maverick as early now as, I just want to get, 11th of April, a few days ago. People, my theory is that not only the floods that is currently happening in South Africa, but also in the rain that fell in the Karoo area, creating the locust plague, were the direct result of cloud seeding. So this is terrorism. This is not a natural occurrence. This is not climate change. This is climate terrorism that has occurred. People, I've seen now, let me just share my input in this as well, and my evidence, that for a long time we've stayed next to the Wonderboom airport in Pretoria. And every Wednesday, there was this strange aeroplane that looked like one of these poison throwers that went up in the air. And when you look at the air directly above the Wonderboom airport base, airport in Pretoria, you could see straight lines above clouds, and then that very afternoon it will rain. We've seen the aeroplane a couple of, about 2 months ago, February, around there. My daughter actually saw this aeroplane in the air also on a Wednesday that was making the one after the other return route over Pretoria. That very afternoon, we've experienced a tremendous thunderstorm. Just last week, on the 12th of April, we saw the cloud seeding clouds over Pretoria, followed by a heavy rain thereafter. At a time when we had these floods already going. So why do our government allow cloud seeding to happen at the time we are experiencing severe floods? People have died. People have lost their entire businesses because of this. This has drawn the line for me in the sand. The government is our enemy. The government has become uncontrolled. They are abusing legislation that has been put up to them to use to safeguard us. But they are using those very legislation to destroy our lives. What are we as the people going to do about this? We need an urgent change of regime in this country. And we don't want any of the 14 political parties there. So how are we going to maneuver this to get rid of each and every one of those political parties which have ruined our lives for the past 2 years and they want to continue with it? What are we going to do about that? People, Liberty Fighters Network is busy with every single thing that we can legally do. We don't support any form of violence. But unfortunately, when this is going on in the way it is, and we are giving rope to the government time and time again, and they are lying to us in our faces, they are underestimating our intelligence. Sadly, that's the time when we as the people need to come together and say, we had enough. How are we going to bridge that and to see this through? It's up to us. I'm very much emotional about this because, as I've said before, some of our supporters have lost their entire businesses. Liberty Fighters Network ourselves have lost a bakkie that was totally flooded as well. And I don't even want to mention about the people who died. They were killed by a terrorist act by our own government on our own people. This has become serious, people, and I'm not going to sit back and see this happening. Let's pray and hope that everything will go well and there will be peace sooner than later in our country. God bless.